are in pain, you always have Charlie Pellet to make you feel a little bit better, at least for a minute. Then you look at the markets again. This has not been fun. There's a bit of a bid under Bitcoin, but there's a lot of red here on the screen. We'll see how that fares after the business roundtable gathering later on. The president is supposed to speak, and I'll be clear, after the bell to the group here in Washington. Then we wake up to CPI tomorrow, and the confluence of those two events could be an interesting driver for better or worse. You can keep that in your pocket as we watch Capitol Hill today. Pretty important. They say they're going to vote, and well, as you're going to hear in a second from the speaker, they say it's going to pass, but that remains a real question. With several holdouts still in the Republican conference, that's all you need to sink this, because not a single Democrat, as it appears, is preparing to vote for it, at least in the House. It'll be a different story in the Senate. And Speaker Johnson held a news conference about this a short time ago. Here's what he said.
You can all read the bills, 99 pages. This clean CR contains no poison pill riders, no policy riders there at all, no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, zero, no cuts to veterans benefits, zero. In fact, as was noted, we plus up the accounts for veterans.
4 o'clock, we're told. No one seems to know exactly what the vote count will be. 99 pages. You have a couple of hours to read them all. Nathan Dean already has. That's what he does for a living, and intercepting calls from people like you who want to know what in the world is going on. The chances of a shutdown on Friday, that's what we're talking about here. The government runs out of money unless they figure this out and pass it through the House and the Senate. And there could be, by the way, it's funny how Washington works. There could be a stopgap to allow enough time to pass a stopgap. Either way, the markets wouldn't love a government shutdown on top of everything else that's going on. That's why Nathan's phone is ringing as our senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Nathan Dean, great to see you. Your friends calling? You must need a headset to keep up with the phone calls.
We're actually getting a lot of call from the fixed income side at the moment because the government shutdown bleeds into the debt ceiling issue. Because, when it comes to the government shutdown, there's not a lot of equity impacts here. I mean, markets generally, if they do respond, they're usually back up the next day. That's what happened with President Trump in the first administration when we had that 35-day shutdown.
Yeah.
But the question is that if Congress can't come together on a 6-month continuing resolution, which we're coining clean-ish, not clean, but clean-ish,
Fair.
What happens for the debt ceiling debate that comes in June or July? So that is the bigger concern, I think, for the markets. This is almost like a test of going through the process before we get to the debt ceiling debates. But when it comes to the shutdown, we still think we're only at a 30% chance of it shutting down, maybe with some additional time, per your point about getting the Senate to come together, because we just don't think this time is ripe for both Republicans and Democrats to say, this is the point where we're politically advantageous in moving forward with a shutdown.
You've got names on the board: Tony Gonzalez, Tim Burchett, Corey Mills, Rich McCormick, Kat Kamak, Andy Ogles, Brian Fitzpatrick. Does Donald Trump need to start making phone calls, or is the assumption that everyone falls in line eventually around here?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, obviously, I think Representative Thomas Massey may be a little bit different.
I guess so, huh?
President Trump put out a Truth Social post about him, which
you like that?
Representative Massey's already fundraising on.
Yeah, I bet.
But what I will say is that the combination of pressure coming from the White House, plus the idea here that they need to show unity, I think it's possible that this could pass. I also think it's possible it may not. It's going to be that close. However, when it comes to the House, if they pass this, it goes to the Senate. You'll need probably 8 Senate Democrats to go with it. I think Senator Rand Paul will be a no. But if I just don't think this is the time that the Senate Democrats are going to say, look, we're not entirely on board with this deal, but it's not a bad deal either. And so the Republicans could have insisted on a lot more here. Do they want to risk that in 1 month from now, that the Republicans come back and say, you know what, let's go for a lot more cuts. Let's go for a lot more different things. So, I think Senator Mark Kelly was hinting at this yesterday when he was talking to some reporters about this. So I just, again, don't think we're going to see a shutdown this weekend.
Interesting. Boy, you're naming names here. Imagine what it's like to be Tom Massey. You look at Truth Social, this President Trump. Congressman Thomas Massey of beautiful Kentucky is an automatic no vote on just about everything, he says. In all caps, he should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. He's just another grandstander who's too much trouble and not worth the fight. Reminds me of Liz Cheney, by the way. Those are fighting words. So we heard back from Mr. Massey 3 times I've had a challenger who tried to be more MAGA than me. None busted 25%. So we're going to maybe figure he stays a no vote on this, right?
Yeah.
Is there a chance that the speaker brings it to the floor and it fails?
I think there is a chance. I think there is a chance that the speaker brings it to the floor and it fails. But if the speaker brings it to the floor, I wouldn't say that the pressure is on him. The pressure is on the remaining no votes, because are you going to bring this idea that a Republican bill that is supported by the White House fails on national TV, and then you have this type of drama
So
going
that's a
through?
strategy in itself.
I think that's a strategy in itself, because I do think that the amount of pressure that's coming from the White House is unlike anything that anybody on Capitol Hill has seen over the last 20, 30 years. And so, again, I just wouldn't be surprised if this does pass, and then the onus goes on to the Senate Democrats.
Fascinating.
I didn't think that this past week, but the level of pressure coming from the White House is a little bit stronger than I think people were talking about.
J.D. Vance went up there this morning. Can he take credit for it if this thing
Maybe.
is over the finish line? All right, so I have to ask you about tariffs, because I know your phone's ringing about that as well. That's where the real uncertainty lies. I mean, you put, 30% odds you said on a shutdown?
Yeah.
So let's put that aside for a moment. Interesting conversation last evening with Doug Ford, the premier. You know, they say premier, not premier in Canada. I learned that yesterday. You knew this already. Chicago guy, I don't know. He's the guy slapping retaliatory tariffs on the United States and got Donald Trump very upset last night. We talked to him on Balance of Power. Here's what he said.
There's one person that will put us in a recession, and that's President Trump. I always say when the market speaks, you have to listen. The market is speaking. CEOs are speaking. People are speaking out. Why is he doing this to his largest customer in the world, Canada? No one buys more products off the U.S. than Canada does, including autos. I don't believe in protectionism with your two closest friends and allies in the entire world.
I could listen to that accent all day long. Fast forward to this morning. Based on Ontario, Canada placing a 25% tariff on electricity into the U.S., I've instructed my Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff, which, of course, Nathan Dean brings us to 50%. Is this still a negotiating tool? What are we calling this now at this point?
What we're calling it is shock and awe. I mean, we actually use the coin shock and awe because President Trump has consistently tried to shock the markets and negotiating partners like Canada.
Into a heart attack.
Exactly. But then subsequently over the next day or two, then you see the little nugget come in, Canada and Mexico, 25% tariffs, 30-day delay. Canada and Mexico tariffs are on. Now it's April 2nd. Now, I will say this situation is a little bit different because unlike a universal tariff, we're talking about steel and aluminum. And, obviously Premier Ford is a little bit different in terms of Mark Carney, the Prime Minister delegate or, designee that's coming in.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of different negotiations here at play. But I will say is that, President Trump continues to go down this path of tariffs, and April 2nd is coming faster than we think. And this idea of reciprocal tariffs, investors need to prepare for it because I certainly think President Trump will put these tariffs on April 2nd.
Yeah.
The question is, how much do we see them roll back in the days after? Are we looking at exemptions? Are we looking at different types of, scaling down numbers? Not sure, but it will be really interesting to see tomorrow and the rest of the week. Is there any type of nuggets that we can see where potentially some of this is pulled back?
Is this drawing fixed income questions as well? You mentioned concern about the debt ceiling, but this plays into the bond market directly as well.
Yeah, it does. It all does. I mean, and so I think more questions we're getting right now on tariffs is about automobiles. President Trump said, look, he's threatening to destroy the Canadian automobile industry. But what he's talking about is the supply chain of American automobile makers that use Canada and Mexico as well.
Yes.
You can't change those supply chains overnight. Bloomberg News just put out a great story about aluminum bats for baseball. I mean, there's a lot of small things that are coming out of Canada that Americans use. And the shifting of manufacturing, the shifting of supply chains can't happen overnight. So, we have to actually essentially play the scenario of, look, what does the world look like under 25% universal tariff? Are there going to be export taxes? Because, look, we haven't talked about Canadian retaliation either to this. If they wanted to make potash a very difficult thing for American farmers to obtain, they can.
Absolutely.
And so, it's, again, just playing the scenario analysis of picking a specific industry, in this case, automobiles and fertilizer and ag, and then trying to dive a little bit deeper into like the supply chain challenges with the idea that maybe this gets resolved in 3 to 6 months. I mean, I don't want to say it can't happen forever, but, there probably is an equilibrium coming sometime in the next 3 to 6, 9 months.
Okay.
Whether it's positive or negative for the industry, we still have to wait and see.
Equilibrium is quite a word to use right now. That story you mentioned, by the way, Sean Donnan did a great job. From baseball bats to caskets is the headline. Trump tariffs set to hit home. It's interesting to actually put products to the story here. You talk about, aluminum and steel as these sort of abstract things. New tariffs will target over $150 billion, Sean writes, in imported consumer products, aluminum baseball bats, fishing reels, burial caskets, in addition to the raw products. So funerals are going to get more expensive?
Well, I think American consumers are going to be paying attention to it. And that's where President Trump needs to, I think out of everything here that potentially could change President Trump's mind, it's the sticker shock that Americans are going to see. Look, my colleague Anurag Rana put out a note about how the China tariffs are going to impact Apple.
Yeah.
I was on the fence buying a MacBook. I bought it that night.
Wow.
And so because if it was going up 20%, even more, it was going to hit Apple's bottom line.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the one thing that will change President Trump's mind, if it does, is this idea of sticker shock. Because President Trump has already said, look, buying American is not buying cheap goods, and there's more talking points coming out. But at the end of the day, prices are what drove a lot of people to President Trump in the November elections, and they're looking for price relief. So we'll have to see if the White House responds.
Just wait for that CPI tomorrow. We're out of time. How often are you getting the question, have we bottomed? Capitulation. Are we not there yet? We're not
there
No one's
yet.
even asking you that.
Not yet.
That should say a lot. Nathan Dean, our good friend here on Balance of Power. Thank you so much, Nathan. Bloomberg Intelligence. Look for him on the terminal and online. Always a great conversation. We always learn a lot. 30%. Remember what Nathan said. We're looking at a vote in the House around 4 o'clock. And we'll have our signature panel up next, right here on Bloomberg.